The Oreus range from Mountain Equipment may have just fully bridged the gap between down and synthetic, thanks to some incredibly brilliant minds from Mountain Equipment. Now we'll get a little bit more into just what makes the Oreus tick. So this is the Oreus jacket. It's also available in vest form, uses exactly the same tech, and in both men's and women's. But the main focus of this video, because I'm wearing it, will be the Oreus jacket. Now the Oreus is lightweight, packable, super breathable, and really warm for its weight, thanks to the Atherm tech, which is what powers this jacket. So let's get a little bit more stuck in and we'll tell you why we think this jacket might be something just a little bit special. Now, Mountain Equipment designed the Orus from the ground up to be a super lightweight alpine insulation piece. And we think they've really succeeded in that, but the real element with the Orus is just how versatile it is. We think it's not just suitable for alpine climbing, which is its kind of home territory. So there's a few features in this jacket that we'll go into a little bit more that are really specific to alpine climbing. But it's just so versatile because it's lightweight and packable. We think it's really suitable for fast packing, for lightweight mountaineering duties, being at the crag like we are today. So as a slightly lighter weight belay piece, if you're in the depths of like a Scottish winter, you're probably going to be wanting something a little bit heavier weight. So something a little bit more like a Fitzroy or a Citadel from Mountain Equipment would still have their place. But if you're traveling a bit faster, a bit lighter, or you just don't want to carry as much because you don't need quite as much insulation, then the Oreus could well be the jacket for you. So before we go into the features, we'll go over what the jacket is made from, and we'll split that into two parts to keep things simple. So there's the inner and outer fabrics, and then there's the insulation, the Atherm, which is the really exciting bit. Now, the inner and outer fabric are exactly the same. It's a 10 denier woven ultra lightweight ripstop fabric. So if you do catch it on something, it will do the classic thing of ripstop and it will go in straight lines and it should stop the rip. Now, 10 denier is a very lightweight fabric, which is part of the reason that this jacket is so packable. It does feel surprisingly sturdy, but I'm not going to say that you're not going to catch it on something and tear it to shribbons if you're really putting it to the test in sort of a more traditional mountaineering environment. If you're using it for alpine climbing or you're just a bit conscious, you can always throw a shell over the top of this to protect it a little bit more because this is still a lightweight shell. Mountain Equipment have also treated this with a fluorocarbon-free DWR treatment, which will shed light rain and snow from the surface. And being a synthetic jacket, it will still work when it gets wet. However, we must state that obviously this isn't a waterproof jacket. So if you are in those really wet conditions, you will want to throw a shell over the top of this to keep everything dry and to keep you nice and warm. But if you do get caught out, as I say, synthetics do still perform when they're wet. Now, with that lining fabric being the same as the outer, Plasma 10 denier is the name of it, by the way, which is Mountain Equipment's own version of the nylon ripstop fabric, so it's their proprietary fabric. It's really smooth, so it slides over other layers very easily. However, I did find that when I was putting it on with slightly wet hands, because I got caught out a little bit, it did catch on my wet hands a little bit, so that's something to be mindful of. If you're putting it on over wet layers, but particularly over wet hands, it might catch a little bit, but once it's on, it's really smooth to get on and off, feels really good. So now onto the secret sauce of what really makes the Oreus family tick, and that's the Atherm insulation, which is patent pending from Mountain Equipment, so it's exclusive to them. And it starts off being pretty familiar, so it uses a 100% recycled polyester fill, which is very similar to what you see on most synthetic jackets out on the market. But it's what Mountain Equipment have then done to it that really makes it slightly different from everything else. And they've woven it through a heat reflective fabric layer, so you get a 3D matrix, so they've woven it through, that then allows the jacket to loft up significantly better than standalone polyester fill would, and also retain a little bit more heat thanks to that heat reflective fabric. Now, this heat reflective fabric and the way it's woven together makes this jacket really lofty and perform very similarly to a high performance down. But obviously, in the environments where you might otherwise use down from a weight and pack size perspective and that warmth to weight ratio, this gets really close now because of the way that that 3D matrix works. And it has the advantage of being synthetic, so it will still perform when it gets wet, whereas down, if it gets wet, it clumps together and can no longer keep you warm. So that's where this, in those slightly damp environments, is probably going to be an advantage. Moving on to the features now, and as usual, we'll start at the top and we'll work our way down. The Oreus has a hood that is fully adjustable and helmet compatible for mountaineering and climbing. There's a hook and loop volume adjuster on the rear and inline elasticated adjusters inside the hood to really cinch it down around the helmet. Or if you're not wearing a helmet, it will cinch down to be head compatible too. Moving on to the front zip. Front zip provides two-way functionality, allowing easy access to a climbing harness, and also has a rear insulated baffle running behind it to prevent a little bit of heat loss through the zip, because that's a common area where you will find some heat loss. You also get a bottom popper at the bottom of the zip, so that if you do need to vent with the jacket a little bit, if you are getting a little bit too warm, you can clip that popper in, unzip from the bottom, and then you get a little bit of extra venting there. Moving on to storage, on the external of the jacket, you have a Napoleon chest pocket. You also get 2 zipped, YKK zipped hand pockets, which are really useful for gloves, snacks, anything that is easy to grab on the outside. And then on the inside, you get a dump pocket. Now this dump pocket is again useful for gloves and slightly bigger carry. And Mountain Equipment have also integrated 2 carabiner loops onto this with the intention of you using it as an integrated stuff sack for the jacket. So you turn it inside out and stuff it into that pocket. You can then clip that to your harness thanks to those carabiner loops. However, if you want the jacket to be slightly smaller, you can also stuff it into a dry bag or separate stuff sack, and it will compress down even more. So if weight and pack size are a real bearer there, then you can stuff it down into a much smaller package. So moving on to the sleeves of the jacket, you do get really good levels of articulation, so you can reach up overhead. Your main adjustment on the Oreus is the dual tether draw cord on the bottom hem. And that's a feature from Mountain Equipment that's on a lot of their outerwear jackets. So you get a split draw cord rather than a traditional one that will have an elasticated loop. The idea there is that you can adjust both the front and rear of the jacket independently, but it also means you don't have a fixed loop that can possibly grab on things and catch when you're out in the real world, when you're climbing. Now, one very important thing when it comes to any jacket is the fit, particularly when it's an insulation piece. And this is where things might get a little bit muddy for some people. So it's going to feel like a bit of a cop-out, but it really depends on what you plan on doing with the Oreus as to where we see you should go for your sizing. So for instance, I'm normally a size large in most pieces of outerwear, but this is actually an XL from ME. So with their sizing, I can technically get into the large, but I find it quite tight across the chest. And in general feedback, that's something that we found from a lot of people, is that they do find it on the smaller end of the size range when it comes to fit. If you're using it as a belay piece, which is predominantly where I see myself using this Oreus, I'm potentially going to be chucking it over other things, over other jackets a little bit more often, and it just gives me a little bit more space in and around the chest, so I feel a little bit more comfortable if I do have to layer underneath it. But it's also then not so bulky that I can't throw a shell over the top of it. If you're using it for sort of more fast and light alpine missions, or you're going to be using it for fast packing and you're a little bit more of a racing snake, then you can probably go with your normal size. But we generally recommend getting yourself to a physical store to try one of these pieces on. The other thing that I've already mentioned is that the sleeves are quite long. So the idea there is that when you're reaching up overhead like I just did then, you still get full coverage, but I have quite long arms, so you can kind of see that the sleeves are quite long there. It is also reasonably long in the body. I have quite a long torso again, but I get nice full coverage. Again, if I drop to the large, it was that little bit shorter. So if you want a slightly more protective jacket, if you're going to be using it for belaying so it sits over the top of a harness, maybe go up a size from your normal size so that you get something that is a little bit more protective overall. The Oreus from Mountain Equipment is a big step forward in the realms of synthetic insulation, and it's definitely been something that has made me think about what jacket I'm taking out, and it's meant I've left my down behind a lot more often and taken this boy out with me. Now, it is very early days for Atherm and we're very excited about it, but that does mean it comes with an additional cost. And that cost is something that only you can justify whether you think you need from the benefits of something like the Oreus. But we are very excited about what Mountain Equipment are going to do with Atherm in the future, and about the Oreus jacket and the Oreus family in general, so the Oreus vest and the men's and women's versions of all of the Oreus jackets. Is there anything more that you'd like to know about the Oreus or Mountain Equipment in general? Pop them in the comments down below. We will get back to you. We always appreciate you liking and subscribing to our videos, and if there's anything else you'd like to see, please do let us know. But we will see you in the next one.